base salary of $8 million a year, plus bonuses for every major win.
Tadej Pogačar enters the 2026 season as the highest paid rider in professional cycling, earning €8 million as a base salary, roughly 200 times the UCI-mandated minimum wage for a first-year professional, according to Gazzetta dello Sport's January salary ranking, compiled by journalist Ciro Scognamiglio from official UCI figures. That number can rise past 10 million once bonuses are factored in. No rider in the men's World Tour peloton comes close. The ranking is the clearest official picture yet of exactly how far ahead of the field his contract with UAE team Emirates XRG has pulled him. If the business side of cycling interests you as much as the racing does, this channel covers exactly that. Team budgets, rider contracts, and where the money in the peloton actually goes. Subscribing means you won't miss the next one of these. That number comes from a contract extension Pogacar signed with UAE Team Emirates XRG in the autumn of 2024, a deal that runs through 2030. The extension raised his base salary from €7 million a year to 8, not counting bonuses. Performance incentives can add another €1 million for a Tour de France win, $500,000 each for the Giro d'Italia and the Vuelta a España, and $250,000 for the World Championships. Attached to the contract is a release clause of €200 million, a figure the sport has never had to reckon with before. The bonuses are not theoretical. In 2025, Pogacar won both the Tour de France and the World Championships road race, a combination that alone would have added something close to €1.25 million on top of his base salary. Add 7 one-day victories, 3 of them monuments, among them Liège-Bastogne-Liège and the Giro di Lombardia, and 2 stage race titles, and the season's total compensation from the team moved well past €9 million before a single sponsorship deal outside UAE Team Emirates XRG was counted. Riders at his level typically carry personal sponsorship arrangements on top of a team salary, bike fit partners, apparel, equipment endorsements, and those figures are rarely disclosed in any detail. The number the public sees is already an undercount. It's worth separating that salary from what the sport actually pays out in prize money, because the two get confused. The Tour de France is organized by ASO, a Mori sport organization, and winning it outright is worth €500,000 to the general classification champion, drawn from a total race purse of roughly €2.3 million, spread across 3 weeks and the entire field. Traditionally, that prize money is pooled and split among the whole team, rather than kept by the winner, so a domestique on the winning squad can walk away with nearly as much Tour prize money as the man who stood on the top step in Paris. Set against Pogacar's €8 million base salary, the entire Tour de France purse is worth less than a third of what he earns in a single year just for showing up to the season. In cycling, unlike tennis or golf, the money was never really in the prizes. It's in the contract. Jonas Vingegaard, the 2-time Tour de France champion at Visma Leasebike, earns somewhere between €6 and €6.5 million a season. Remco Evenepoel, who transferred to Red Bull Bora-Hansgrohe ahead of the 2025 season, sits around €5 to €5.5 million. Primož Roglic, also at Red Bull Bora-Hansgrohe, earns close to €4.5 million. None of these are small numbers. All of them are, by a wide margin, smaller than Pogacar's, and all 3 riders have won Grand Tours themselves. Further down the list, the picture doesn't level out so much as it drops in steps. Mathieu van der Poel and Wout van Aert, both classic specialists rather than Grand Tour contenders, are estimated at roughly €4 million each. Tom Pidcock, since his move to the Pinarello Q 36.5 Pro Cycling team, sits around 2.7 to 3.5 million. Adam Yates, Pogacar's own teammate at UAE Team Emirates XRG, earns close to 2.7 million, a figure that puts one of the strongest climbers in the sport at roughly a third of what his team leader makes. Egan Bernal and Carlos Rodriguez, both at Ineos Grenadiers, are each estimated near 2.5 million, a fraction of what the team paid Bernal alone during his tour-winning years before his 2022 crash. The gap becomes more revealing at the team level. Cyclingnews estimates that UAE Team Emirates XRG spends around €30 million on rider salaries alone, against a total team budget reported near 50 million. That puts Pogacar's individual pay at somewhere close to a quarter of what the entire roster earns to race bicycles for a season. It is worth sitting with that figure for a moment. One rider's salary, set against every domestique, every lead-out man, every rider whose entire job for 3 weeks in July is to disappear into the wind so that Pogacar doesn't have to. Team principal Mauro Gianetti has been the architect of that structure, building the roster around the assumption that protecting one rider's ability to win Grand Tours and monuments is worth concentrating resources at the very top of the payroll.
$1 million. That makes him comfortably the highest paid cyclist in the world.
Part of what allows that model to work is where the money originates in the first place. UAE Team Emirates XRG draws its budget through Emirati aviation and tourism sponsorship, a funding base with a different risk tolerance than the bicycle and component manufacturers that used to underwrite most World Tour teams. Red Bull, an energy drink company with a media division built around extreme sports, took on Bora Hansgrohe's budget with a similar appetite for spending on visibility over incremental results. Ineos Grenadiers is funded by Jim Ratcliffe's chemicals conglomerate, Ineos Group, the same ownership structure behind Manchester United and Ineos's sailing and Formula One programs. None of these are cycling companies in the traditional sense, and cycling is one marketing line among several on each of their budgets, funded in proportion to the attention it generates. Pogacar generates a great deal of that attention, and the spending follows him accordingly. The average World Tour team budget for men climbed from 26.2 million euros in 2023 to 31.1 million the year after, and reached 33.1 million by 2026, according to the same Gazzetta figures compiled by Scott Emilio. That average is pulled upward by a small handful of wealthy teams: UAE Team Emirates XRG, Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe, and Ineos Grenadiers among them, each operating with budgets approaching 50 million euros. Most of the peloton is nowhere close to that figure, and the teams without it compete on the same roads, in the same races, against riders paid several times what their own leaders make. The World Tour's promotion and relegation system makes that imbalance harder to ignore, not easier. Teams are ranked by points earned over 3 seasons, and the bottom finishers risk dropping out of the top division entirely, losing automatic entry to races like the Tour de France in the process. Points come disproportionately from stage race results in Grand Tour placings, which means a team fighting relegation has every incentive to spend beyond its comfort zone on one rider capable of scoring points in bulk, even at the expense of depth everywhere else on the roster. The system rewards exactly the kind of top-heavy budget that produces an €8 million contract sitting next to a €44,000 one on the same page of a team's payroll. At the other end sits the median rider, and this is where the shape of the sport becomes clearest. The average salary for a self-employed World Tour rider is around €654,000 a year, a number itself inflated by the presence of riders like Pogacar at the very top of the scale. The median, the figure that actually splits the peloton in half, sits considerably lower than the average suggests. In 2026, UCI rules set the mandatory minimum salary for a veteran World Tour rider at €44,150. A neo-professional, someone in their first 2 seasons in the sport, is guaranteed just €35,721. Those minimums are negotiated in part through the CPA, the Cyclistes Professionnels Associés, the riders' union, which has pushed for incremental floor increases even as the ceiling has moved far beyond anything collective bargaining can meaningfully address. Put those two numbers next to Pogacar's 8 million, and the comparison stops being interesting and starts being strange. Roughly 200 times the mandated minimum for one rider in a sport where a meaningful share of the field is still splitting hotel rooms 2 to a bed on the smaller teams, because that's what's left in the budget once the top of the roster has been paid, and because for a lot of these riders, the alternative to a World Tour contract at minimum wage is no World Tour contract at all. This is not new in the abstract. Cycling has always had leaders and domestiques, stars and support riders paid according to their role, and a Tour de France squad has never split its winnings evenly among 9 riders. What's changed is the scale of the split. A decade and a half ago, Alberto Contador's €5 million in 2011 was treated as an outlier, a figure nobody else in the sport approached. During the Team Sky years that followed, the biggest salaries in the sport, including Chris Froome's, were understood to sit somewhere in the 4 to 5 million range at their peak, already a jump from what came before. Pogacar's current deal is more than 1.5 times Contador's number, without adjusting for anything, in a sport where the pay of the median rider has moved only modestly across the same stretch of time. None of these figures are official, in the sense of a team press release. The ranking referenced earlier draws on figures Gazzetta dello Sport says come from the UCI, verified independently by Cyclingnews, according to that outlet's own reporting, but no team publishes individual rider salaries directly. UAE, Team Emirates, XRG, has never confirmed Pogacar's exact base salary publicly, though team management has repeatedly declined to deny the reporting when asked directly. The uncertainty runs in both directions. Some estimates place his all-in compensation, bonuses and personal sponsorships included, closer to 12 million euros a year, while others stay closer to the reported 8 million euro base. What's harder to dispute is the shape of the gap, even allowing for a wide margin of error on any single number in this account.
Yeah, Rafa, the last 5 years in this team, with me, alongside me in almost every race, all the big races.
Teams like UAE, Team Emirates, XRG have built their financial model around a small number of riders capable of winning Grand Tours and monuments because those results are what attract the sponsorship money that funds the rest of the operation. Isaac Del Toro, a young climber on the same roster and already considered one of the sport's most promising generational talents, still earns a fraction of what his team leader does, despite already contending for Grand Tour podiums himself. The logic behind that gap is straightforward from a business standpoint. Sponsors pay for visibility. Visibility follows results, and results at the level that moves a sponsorship budget are concentrated in very few riders each season. It also means a rider's earning power in professional cycling now depends less on being a strong professional cyclist and more on being one of the handful of riders capable of winning the specific races that sponsors actually watch on television. Television and streaming rights follow that same logic. Broadcasters pay more for races where Pogacar is likely to appear on the final podium, because those broadcasts draw the largest audiences, and audience size is what advertisers and subscription platforms are actually buying. A rider capable of consistently producing that outcome becomes worth more to the sport's entire economy, not just to his own team, which is part of why other teams have shown little appetite for testing the 200 million euro release clause attached to his contract. Buying Pogacar away from UAE Team Emirates XRG would mean buying a meaningful share of the sport's television value along with him. That logic reshapes team behavior as much as it reshapes pay. A team built around one rider capable of winning the Tour de France will spend its transfer budget protecting that asset. Better domestiques, better altitude camps, better equipment testing, before it spends anything improving conditions for the riders further down the roster. It's a defensible use of limited money if the goal is winning races. It also means the gap between a team's best paid rider and its median rider tends to widen every time that team wins something, because winning is what justifies paying the star even more the following season, while the riders supporting him are replaceable in a way he isn't. The risk in professional cycling doesn't scale with the pay the way the pay itself does. A crash that ends a career is exactly as likely for a domestique earning 44,000 euros as it is for a rider earning 8 million, and the domestique carries none of the buyout clause, none of the multi-year guarantee, none of the personal sponsorship income that cushions a star rider's exit from the sport. Most World Tour contracts run 1 to 2 years rather than 6. A rider in the middle of the pack can spend an entire career riding in service of other people's victories, then retire in his early 30s with a body that has absorbed a decade of racing and a bank account that reflects a mandated minimum wage more than it reflects the sport he gave that decade to. Pogacar, by contrast, is contracted, insured, and bonused against outcomes 6 years into the future, an arrangement that exists for perhaps a dozen riders in the entire men's World Tour peloton at any given time. Smaller World Tour teams operate on budgets a fraction of the size of UAE Team Emirates XRGs, and most of their riders sit close to the mandated minimum, regardless of how many seasons they've spent racing at the top level. A capable climber can earn a reasonable wage as a support rider on a wealthy team, or take on real leadership responsibility at a smaller one for considerably less money overall. Either path is available. Neither pays anything close to what the very top of the sport now commands, and the distance between the ceiling and the floor keeps growing faster than the middle of the pay scale does. For a neo-professional earning €35,721 in his first season, the €8 million figure at the top of the sport isn't really a comparison. It's a different sport wearing the same jersey. None of this changes what happens at the start line. A rider ranked 50th in the world, earning close to the mandated minimum, still rolls out next to Pogačar on the same road, races the same distance, and climbs the same mountains. The economics sit entirely outside the race itself. They show up before the flag drops and after the finish line, in contracts nobody in the crowd can see, and they have very little to do with how hard any individual rider is pedaling on a given Tuesday in July. Pogačar turns 28 in the final year of his current deal, 2030, by which point the terms will likely have been renegotiated more than once, upward rather than down if his recent seasons are any indication. Whatever comes next for a contract that runs to 2030 and carries a €200 million release clause, the riders finishing behind him in every race this season are still working toward a salary the UCI sets by rule rather than by market, because for most of the peloton, that rule remains the only floor the sport has. If you want the next breakdown like this one, team budgets, contracts, and the numbers behind the sport, subscribing is the easiest way to catch it when it goes up.